right, everybody, shall we?
Yes.
It's that time. This is the biggest crowd we've had in a while.
Yeah.
I owe the pleasure.
World religions, baby.
Yeah.
Look at the girls. Color us intrigued.
Color us intrigued. Okay, so I thought I'd start with audience participation. What makes a religion a religion? How do you define religion?
Something you believe in.
Something you believe,
Faith.
faith,
A leader.
a leader, okay. What else?
Cause.
That changes your life or causes you to want to change your life.
Causes change to your life?
Behavior, I should say.
Organized.
Organized?
Ooh,
Yes.
yeah, that's a good word.
Kind of when you need something more than what's right here in front of you.
Okay. So it lets you tap into resources otherwise,
Funded with literature.
I'm sorry?
Funded with literature.
Okay,
Resource.
some sort of literature. Good answers. How about a couple of definitions? Just for fun. Harriet Martineau, a sociologist, one of the first female sociologists. So she is not coming necessarily from a Christian perspective, for the record. Says religion is the belief in an ever-living God, that is, in a divine mind and will ruling the universe and holding moral relations with humankind. There's another definition coming, so you can write it all down or whatever. This is an interesting definition because most people, when they think of religion, this word comes up, right?
Sure.
God. So this is a definition, this is a thought about religion that is based upon some sort of deity, some sort of higher power, you might say. But what we'll learn is there are many of the world religions that are actually atheistic. There is no God.
Right, I don't know what they
Yeah.
They're major
into.
religions in the world. So this assumes, shall we say, kind of a Western view of religion, that there is some sort of God, but when we move to Eastern religions, we might see a little different view of how things work. So how about Paul Tillich, who wrote a book called Systematic Theology? I know that was our last class.
No, I already had that. Didn't we study that in something?
I read that book, yes.
Yes.
We definitely had
In
that book,
college or seminary?
seminary, I think. Might have been in college for your class.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying.
So PBA probably.
PBA. Yeah.
Religion is the state of being grasped by an ultimate concern. A concern which qualifies all other concerns as preliminary and which itself contains the answer to the question of the meaning of life. How's that? This is a theologian, right? This is how theologians talk, in circles. You know, the other one, the sociologist is like, I'm dealing with people and I want to make it clear. We're dating theologians, as we kind of learned as we went through however long of theology, approach things a little bit differently. Rather than say God, Tillich uses this phrase, ultimate concern. And he defines it by saying an ultimate concern is one that qualifies all other concerns. Does that make sense?
No.
So
Yeah, we don't think so, so.
that's good. That's why I'm asking. So an ultimate concern makes everything else preliminary. So
Well, he's establishing a hierarchy.
there is a hierarchy, yes, involved. There's something in religion that calls us to a highest purpose, our greatest devotion, and everything else would be secondary. To use a analogy for moms, if something was happening to your child, your ultimate concern would be the safety of the child.
Yeah.
And your own concern for your own safety might become preliminary or not nearly as important. Like, I'll get hurt badly, even the fatal way, because my ultimate concern is my child is in danger and I will do whatever it takes there. And so, not the perfect example, but that's the idea here, that religion is finding what is your ultimate concern and letting that put everything out and put everything else in an order. And ultimately, you think that ultimate concern is what grants meaning to life. That it answers the question of the meaning of life, or put another way, brings meaning to life. So we are here in our church Christians or believers in Jesus Christ, and we would say that our ultimate concern is faithfulness to God, what he has done for us, living for him. And when we ask questions about the meaning of life, it will go back to who God is and who Jesus is and what he has done for us and how we live for him. That's our ultimate concern. Put another way, there's times people say, in your faith life, not putting this out for, you might agree, you might not agree, but it's like God, other, self. Like you should put God as your ultimate concern, love your neighbor, and then self, or God, the different permutations of that. But God is always at the top of the pyramid, and he informs everything else. So this is more of a theological idea. And I think it fits more, particularly as you look at the realities of the different religions that we'll go through over the course of this thing. Now, I want to distinguish before we go any further between a couple things. Today, we're talking about primarily world religions. And in what I'm going to say Christianity. But you need to understand at this point, in a world religion sense, Christianity is a very broad umbrella. Yes, Catholicism. Yes, Protestantism. Under this world religions umbrella, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, and other Seventh-day Adventists all fit under that, that Christian umbrella when you're studying world religions. Now, we're going to later break that down, and just so you're clear, I don't think Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses believe in the same God we do. They have a different faith. I think were Jesus to return, they would be on the wrong side of judgment because they don't understand truth. So that's where we get into the cults that are offshoots, or the sects that are offshoots of Christianity. But tonight, as we get started and we look at some statistics, Christianity is going to include any religion that has Jesus as a part of it, whether we would consider them orthodox or not. In this case, some not, okay? The second thing we're going to see as we go through some things is anything that we deal with Christianity today, are actually in these world religions, some of the statistics, these are self-identified categories. So when it says this number, this percentage is Christian in the world, it's not because there was a theological conversation with somebody that identified, do they believe Jesus, God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? Do they believe Trinity? Do they believe Jesus is the Son of God? Do they believe salvation by faith alone? None of that. But they say, what are you? They say, I'm a Christian. They may or may not be, but that's what they identify as. And so some of the statistics we'll talk about tonight come from that. But so one of the things Denise and I were talking, kind of throwing some ideas at her earlier, and she was surprised by one of the statistics. And when you explain it that way, I'm like, oh, that makes sense then, when you understand how Christians live. So how about more audience participation? These are 9 symbols of some world religions. Let's see how many you can get. Let's start with this one. Does anybody know what religion this stands for? Christianity. Very good. So far, 100%. How about this one? Judaism. Star of David. Yes. What's number 3?
Buddhism? Hinduism.
Are you asking or telling?
I don't know. I was waiting for something. I was waiting for you to tell me what was right or not.
Any other ideas?
Looks like China.
It looks like Chinese.
Okay.
Last one. Oh, I've never seen that.
Wasn't it? Yes. Okay.
Should have stuck with Hinduism. Hinduism.
Really?
I have
That's it.
some others.
Other than is the bottom.
What was that?
Bottom
what
right
this
is Hinduism.
This one.
Islam.
So,
How about the steering wheel?
The Hindus?
Nope, this is Hindu.
Oh, okay.
I have my notes because I
No,
couldn't.
I've seen that. I can't remember.
I haven't seen it.
Expedition.
There's 8 spokes to a wheel. The 8-fold path. Is that ring any bells?
oh, I do.
Huh.
Buddhism.
Oh,
Okay.
Seriously?
Now we got this.
Confucius.
No.
Shinto.
Shintoism.
Yeah.
How about this one?
Oh, it's Star Warsy.
It sounds like a little Star Warsy. This is not Jedi Knightism.
Okay, of course.
What is it? Do you know?
It's gotta be an error.
What do these look like?
Orange.
Swords.
Swords, yes. Any, that help you at all?
Arabian, what's the Arabian?
I'll give my wife a hint. We've driven in an Uber with a driver from this faith. Usually has a turban on. Sikhism.
Oh.
Sikh.
Sikh. How about the star?
Yeah, I think that's part of.
No, it's in New York.
Go to New York.
How about the star?
New York.
Any thoughts?
Well,
No? None at all?
no.
Heard of Baha'i?
What?
I should have
What?
said Baha'i.
Baha'i.
Oh, yeah, Baha'i, yeah, that's what Ray Wilson
I
is,
was
yeah.
almost said that, but.
Yeah.
I'm like, Baha'i. And then the last one.
Feel like Hare Krishna.
This one,
Spiritualist.
not exactly, sort of, but not specifically. It's called Jainism.
Oh, interesting.
That was Tarzan's faith. No,
How do you spell it?
sorry. So these are 9 symbols. You know, obviously, for us, we understand how significant as Christians a symbol is. And to some degree, we would understand this, the Star of David, and this, another major world religion in Islam, the crescent, the star. That's, I don't know if we have the basis for it, we kind of recognize it. Symbols are important in lots of faiths, in most faiths. And so we see that represented here. We're going to look at, I think, all of these as we go along, and probably a few others. When you think about religions, when you look at these, when you quantify or categorize them, where do you think most of these religions are based?
Where?
What do you mean?
Where do you identify Christianity? Probably Judaism,
In the East,
Middle East.
Hindu.
Eastern.
Everything's east.
Except for Christianity.
Baha'i is a little more Western influence.
Yeah, true.
But we've got
And Shinto.
6 of the 9 are probably pretty, actually 7 if you count Judaism, really more Eastern. You know, we're talking Middle East,
Right.
North Africa, and the Far East, which shouldn't surprise us because where do most of the people in the world live?
Asian.
Right, way over there. What's next? Okay, here's the graph. This is why I explained what Christians mean. 2015 Pew Research Center. I should have asked the question, which faith do you think has the most adherents worldwide?
Wow.
Muslim.
That'd be between
Muslim?
Muslims, yeah.
Christianity.
Christianity and Judaism.
Yes, we had this discussion. Most people, when I ask that, most people do think Muslim, but it's actually, again, Christians. 31%, 24%, in 2015. Now, let me qualify that, self-identified.
Right.
And broader categories than we would think are expressly Christian.
Well, like they say, America's a Christian nation, but that doesn't, does that count? You know.
Everyone's in America.
Yeah.
Right.
Christian, not Christian.
So, yeah, Christians, there's what, 8 billion people or so in the world, according to this, about a fourth, over 2 billion identify as Christians. A little less than 2 billion identify as Muslims. So we're over half of the world's population here. One significant difference, Christians, the trend is decrease. Muslims, the trend is increasing in number. And again, if we were to really factor what this means, that's going to be a much smaller number. Did you notice the third highest group as far as faith in this survey? Did you notice the third biggest piece of the pie?
Unaffiliated.
Unaffiliated. The nuns. People that say they have no religious affiliation.
Huh.
Unaffiliated. I should go back. Did anybody notice the percentage that are Jewish?
Small. It was small.
20.
What?
20.
20? Nope.
I'm guessing 5 to 10.
Wait, what? Say that again?
The percentage that were Jewish.
5 to 10, that.
was like.
It was 0.2%.
Oh, wow.
Oh, look at, we'll talk about Judaism. It's a very important world religion.
Yeah.
Certainly as Christians,
Yeah.
very important for us.
Yes.
Judaism is very unique because probably unlike most of these other religions, yes, it is a religious faith, but it is a nationality and an ethnicity as well. That's a lot of baggage. And that creates a lot of variety in the expression of Judaism. But because we're Christians and because the Jewish faith shares much with us before the coming of Jesus, our understanding would think big, certainly an outsized influence when you consider the statistical reality of who are the Jewish, that make up the percentage of Jewish. By the way, I should have mentioned, unaffiliated trend is finally going down. It was going up until a couple of years ago, and it leveled off, and now it's the nuns, at least in the West, are tapering and heading down, which is good, assuming.
You know, I mean, the thing about Judaism is that Christianity and even the Muslim faith come from that back.
Those three faiths share a very common, they share much common history and certain heroes in their past, but take very different paths.
Right, they're different, but their main root.
Yeah, so it's surprising. Now, when I saw that, I was actually surprised. I don't know, in my mind, I thought Judaism was a huge amount of faith, but on the world stage, a very small part. You see the Hindu, the Buddhist, folk religions is one that could be any number of things. They're like I could say Christians. There's a bunch of different sorts and varieties. Folk religions, there's a bunch of different sorts and varieties there. And then the other 0.8%, between other and Jewish, that's 1% of the 100% of this graph. It's an interesting way to look at things. You would see Christians, Muslims, and kind of these Eastern faiths outside of the unaffiliated dominate the thing. Here's an interesting graph too. It's a map that puts where those faiths are. Now it does us a little help. It looks at Christianity in three broad categories. The blue is more Roman Catholic, the red is more Protestant, and the yellow is the Eastern Orthodox.
Oh, okay.
So all those are under Christianity. When we talk about it, we will do a little bit with the Catholic and Orthodox. We'll get into that because those, significant. We won't go through all the denominations, but certainly those bear a little concern. And then it's broken Islam down in the Sunni and Shia. You can see the Sunni versus the Shia. There's definitely weighted one direction there.
There's Greece in there.
Greece is here.
They're what color, yellow?
Yellow, they're Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. So
That's surprising that in Australia, there's no Catholic color to my knowledge.
there's
In the, it's
there's
red and yellow.
traditional and tribal. So this is a greenish. It's not this.
Oh, okay.
It's this one. It's traditional and tribal.
Okay, and what's red?
Red is mostly Protestant.
Okay, yeah, that's just.
Okay, so traditional and tribal is not considered unaffiliated.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Because if you found somebody that was, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a tribal religion. I can't find one. They would identify as that.
Okay.
They wouldn't say, I don't have any faith.
When I was in Australia, the indigenous people have their own religion.
And I think that's what this is
The-
identifying.
Yeah. Well,
That's where-
they've been around for a long, long time. So what's Vikings originally?
The Norse,
Yeah.
they're,
Yeah.
looks like kind of in the Protestant
Protestant.
color. And by the way, this is not specific. This is broad. Doesn't mean everybody there is this.
No,
in our own country, obviously you've got the Northeast, it's very Catholic.
Mhm.
You've got the coast, you've got Central America and South America, very Catholic, not a surprise. And then, of course, you've got this tribal reality there. You see, Hinduism is the pink. And while 15% of the population of the world is Hindu, when you look at the map, it's pretty well concentrated.
Yeah.
And I mean that literally, it's pretty well concentrated. They're all right there together. Buddhism, the orange, you can kind of see in that Eastern, and then they label Chinese religions this.
Which is,
It could be Jainism, it could be Taoism, it could be Buddhism, Confucianism, different.
They have for Cuba.
Cuba's gonna be Catholic,
Catholic,
for sure, very Catholic.
yeah, very Catholic.
And we were there, and did you go to the church? And their Catholicism has a mix of, it's not really Catholicism,
Yeah.
it's got a mix of some, what's the word I would use?
Island voodoo?
Yeah,
What was the
Maria.
flowers? Wasn't there like
the
a?
sunflower.
The sunflower, wasn't that like demonic or something?
Well, it was their flower they wanted to sell you on the way to the temple, the church.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's demonic, I don't know the symbolism, I don't remember. But I know that was, Miss Nora made us stop and get sunflowers, not for the church, but for herself. But, it's got all of the trappings of Catholicism, but it has these Afro-Caribbean influences.
Santeria.
That's one, that sort of thing can be there. And we saw that in Uruguay when we went there. There was some of that in the neighborhood, the barrio we were working in. So it's an interesting map that I could spend a lot of time just looking at and going, this is fascinating. I'm surprised by this, or I'm not surprised by that. You're like, look at all this Eastern Orthodox, well, Siberia. There's like 5 people there. Or, the Shinto and Buddhism that's obviously going to be more coastal, Japanese and the like.
Burgundy,
This
yeah.
is Muslim, the Shia Muslim. So this is the Sunnis and these are the Shias.
Which ones are more severe?
I'm not there yet.
Okay.
I don't remember. I should know that, but I
I
don't.
don't remember either.
I want to say Shia, but I can't.
Well, I'm gonna say if it's where that it is the red like your Iraqi area?
So we've got, that's
And what did you say that one was?
Shia.
So that's probably the more.
Yeah.
Right.
That's.
Right, we got some,
Yeah.
fingers.
Sikh isn't listed on here. It's probably listed under tribal traditional Chinese religions. It's an Eastern faith. So, you've got huge numbers, for instance, for Hinduism, but its influence, not that it doesn't run into Hindus here, but it's very concentrated. If you're looking at the map, you would say Christianity has large swaths of the map. And yet at the same time, we said the numbers and the influence may be waning. Certainly in certain parts, in other parts, it's growing. So anyway, I think it's a fascinating map that gives us some idea of what's going on. So what I wanted to spend the rest of our time today kind of looking at that, but talking about what makes a religion. You kind of talked about some things, but when we think about, as we go through looking more specifically at various faiths, these are some of the things we'll talk about. When we think about how do I understand a religion? How can I learn about it? These are some of the ideas, characteristics, traits. And the first one, I'm going to use Tillich's phrase. What is the ultimate concern? If we're talking about a theistic religion, theism, a belief in God, we're going to be asking, who is the God? And what does God tell us? Or who are the gods? Because theism is monotheism, the three ones that we mentioned earlier, Judaism, Christianity, and Muslim, but there's many polytheistic religions, with a whole multitude of gods. So ultimate concern is about that. Ultimate concern in other faiths is not at all about God. An atheistic faith, for instance, Buddhism, the ultimate concern is to end the cycle of suffering and enter nirvana. So the whole idea for a Buddhist is life is hard, and you are rewarded or punished based upon how you deal with this life in your next life. And the ultimate concern is to somehow get it right enough so that you exit this cycle of suffering and move on to whatever nirvana is. Not really heaven, but Taoism. Tao is an energy that this sounds like the Jedi Knightism before mentioned. Taoism is the energy of ultimate reality, and the ultimate concern for the Tao is to balance the energy of ultimate reality in your life, or the energies even. How's that sound? How you do that? I don't know. Probably how you feng shui, right? What's that about? Balancing and directing energies and all. So see, by the way, when we talk about that, you see how these religions influence even a nation that's mostly colored in Christian colors, because you can talk to a lot of people that'll talk about your energy or your vibe or your aura. I said that. Very good. You're like gold. Like y'all can do something.
I just after, which religion's reincarnation? Please.
Several, but
Okay.
Buddhism,
Okay.
Hinduism, several. So Buddhism doesn't really have a god, like Hinduism has many gods, polytheistic, but they share some common traits, that idea of
So
reincarnation.
Buddha's not their god? Oh, what is he? Just a fat baby?
Yes, that's what they call him. Yeah,
Baby, come on, I heard it.
yes. No, he's not their god.
I did not know that.
He's the one that shows them the eightfold path to enter.
Oh, I did not know that.
Like Mohammed or Islam.
Like Muhammad, right? He's not God. Allah is God, but he's
Shows.
there's one God, there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, is their chief confession. If we're talking about a deistic religion or a religion that has God, there's a difference in that these ones we've just talked about, these atheistic like Buddhism and suffering and Taoism and energy, those are kind of naturally looking at the world. Suffering is a natural thing. Looking at energies of people and things is natural. Deistic religions are more concerned and look to the supernatural as the source of our ultimate concern, that whatever God or gods they worship has more than just this natural world at his or its disposal, depending on who you're talking about. And so that becomes a little different view. So the supernatural doesn't really play so much in some religions because there's no God, there's no whatever. But others, the supernatural is a huge concern. So ultimate concern, what we want to look at with these religions is, for this faith, what makes the most difference? Or to go back to Tillich's definition, what qualifies all other concerns and answers the question of the meaning of life? For the Buddhist, that idea of nirvana, life is suffering and nobody wants to suffer. Can I get an amen? Nobody does, so that's the way they answer. So ultimate concern, or put another way, they're God, if that applies. We'll talk a lot about that as we go. Second thing, most of them are going to have sacred writings. There's going to be something, some document of some sort, at least in our day and time, that they look to. That's the basis of their faith, or some sort of manual for how they live. What is the Christian sacred writing? The Bible. What's the Jewish sacred writing?
What's the name? What do they call that?
The Tanakh. The Torah, the writings, and the prophets. That's where so that's the Hebrew Bible, as we went through for 40 weeks in that. The Tanakh, the Torah, and the law being very important. What would be the sacred writings for the Buddhists? Anybody know? Did I write those down? Hopefully, because I'm not working. How about, let's do the sacred writing for Islam and Quran, right? For Buddhism, it's the sutras and the Tripitaka, which is the three baskets. For the Hindus, they have the Vedas and the Upanishads. So there's lots of documents out there. And it's in those sacred writings that the ultimate concern is revealed, and usually some sort of ritual acts. There's something you have to do, or there's some things you have to do that are part of your faith that allow you to commune with your God or gods, that appease your God or gods. Something about tradition or whatever that assigns to certain practices a sacredness that separates them from others. For instance, we in our Christian faith would talk about prayer. Now, lots of religions have prayer, but we have an understanding of prayer or scripture reading or any number of practices that we do for that. Meditation for some would be very important. For the Jewish nation in the Torah, we would have sacrifice. The temple system would be vitally important. There's usually many faiths have religious services, whether it's like ours in the sense that you come to a place on a certain day, or whether it's regular things that happen. So there's got to be some ritual acts. Now, interesting thing about ritual acts. Here's a quote I found fascinating, and I think it's fascinating to me from a Christian perspective because I can see this in how some people approach even the Christian faith, that people who practice religions that have a supernatural deity often experience more anxiety because they feel like they need to appease the deity. Mm-hmm. For these people, rituals are a way of alleviating the anxiety because they feel like they're connecting to the supernatural. That was he's a religion scholar, David Noss is his name. That's his quote I found. And I can see that because we talked about, if you've been here for however long we go back to the Hebrew Bible, the ancient Near Eastern religions that Judaism comes out of, they're very much religions meant to offer appeasement to God in return for a benefit. The god of fertility, for instance, has to be appeased so that your crops will grow or you'll have babies. The god of rain or weather has to be appeased because they're going to send the sun or the rain or whatever, or keep the bad weather away. You know, bad weather comes, what do? You got to throw the virgin in the volcano so the bad weather will go away. Do not recommend that the next time there's a hurricane warning. It's not going to work. But nonetheless, this was the way, we say the way ancient Near Eastern people thought, but we think the same way sometimes if we're not careful. And I can see it from people that when something happens that's bad, their first thought is, I'm going to go to church on Sunday. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why? Because something bad happened and I've got to appease the deity that I think caused this bad thing to happen. And it seems like going to church is important to him. So I'm going to go to church. I might even put money in the plate. I might pray every morning. I haven't prayed for years, but I find myself praying all the time now because I'm trying to appease the deity. It's helping me feel something. So
you haven't used the word offerings yet to hold the station. The offerings.
Offerings are very much a ritual act.
Oh, that's exactly what you described. You haven't used the word yet. But when you go to church and you put your offerings in the place, the same thing. Then you
absolutely
have the people that the tribes that sacrifice their daughters as offerings to gods to make the slump go away. So same thing.
Right.
Offerings. Anyway.
And if you go to a Hindu temple, you'll see offerings placed in front of all the different deities and the statues that are there. Something, right.
The head guy.
Yeah.
And so while I don't like saying ritual acts are to appease the deity, because as Christians, that should not be how we view God and the way we view our devotion and our worship of him in that way. He's already been appeased, as it were, by Jesus and his death and resurrection. But this is often the way acts are played out in religion. Even in non-theistic religions, atheist religions, like Buddhism, their symbol is the wheel with the 8 spokes, the eightfold path. It's Buddha's outline of how to achieve what you want. Those are the ritual acts that will be done. The Muslims have ritual acts that they do, prayers certain times a day, almsgiving, and so forth. So ritual acts are important, and they mark the religion. There's some overlap. Sacrifice is not unique to Judaism. In fact, in the world, one of the things that set them apart is they were specifically forbidden from human sacrifice, and that was a very natural part of ancient Near Eastern religion. Ritual acts for Judaism, you might think of food laws, what you can eat, what you can't eat. There are ritual acts that way. And that leads us next to a moral code. So this is not the same as I'll say worship, for lack of a better word. I'm going to go worship, and so I need to know what ritual acts to perform. This is more like what happens in your day-to-day life, your morality, how you in your everyday try to connect to your God or your ultimate concern. We see that maybe the 10 Commandments are that foundational moral code of the Jewish faith that bleeds over into Christianity. And we could go back to, the Code of Hammurabi and other things that we see in history that point to that. But there's some sort of here is how you live. That you do this, it's not just this is how you live, but there's also the negative moral code. We see that in the 10 Commandments. There's the thou shalt, and then there's the or the taboos, if you want to use a word from other faiths. And so the moral code defines how you live, defines how you treat others, defines what you do or do not do. And most religions will have a moral code, some just as behaviors and others that are specific to attaining salvation, however it looks. Fifth, every religion has a worldview. How their adherents, through their sacred writings, see the world. All of us have a worldview. Everybody does. We are Western because we're in the West, and we are influenced in our Western worldview by the Judeo-Christian culture and ethic that influences how we see things. But if we went back to that map and we see, okay, we've got a worldview, but all these different colors also have worldviews, and they're not always anywhere near the same. The Western Judeo-Christian worldview is very different than the Muslim worldview, or than the Hindu worldview, the Buddhist worldview, or the tribal worldviews. Worldviews describe how you relate to the world around you and to other people. Put simply, that's maybe a definition. My worldview is how my faith instructs me to live in this world and how I should treat other people, right? We would say our worldview as Christians probably comes out of the Great Commandment. Love God and love your neighbor. That should influence our worldview. For others, there are more militant worldviews. There are certain streams of, for instance, you probably know Islam, that you don't convert people, and if they don't convert, well, you kill them. They're infidels. They need to go. So that's not a Christian worldview. It's a whole different way of looking at the world. And so we have that. We could go to, if we were looking at tribal or traditional religions, their worldview is probably very much God is in everything. You remember the movie Avatar? At one point, the highest grossing film ever, until one of the Avengers movies knocked it off. Very much a pantheistic worldview, that God is in everything, and God is in a very naturalistic worldview that affects how in that movie, and it affects peoples in the world today, how you interact with nature. Certainly we could look at, maybe some of the Native American cultures and their respect for the natural versus a Western worldview that looks at things a little differently. So there's a definite worldview that comes out of the fact that you have something as your ultimate concern and you're going about doing these ritual acts, you act a certain way, it affects it. And the last thing, social organizations. This is the technical term that I'm using from some, a couple of resources for this course. But this is, how do people of the same religious background relate to each other? You see this in Christianity. We have services, worship services. If you're a part of Western Christianity, part of our social organization centers around going to church on Sunday. That's expected. And that's where you build relationships. It's part of where you build community, ideally, with other believers. Other faiths have a different prioritization. You know, I don't know that as a Hindu, you would go to church in the way we would think of it. But there's definitely interconnectedness in the society based on their faith. Sometimes it's a faith that's more based, a tribal religion or a folklore would be more family based. Like everything's about your social organization is your family, and you might not interact much outside of there. And even we could look at the idea that in Judaism, typically the parents would have children and the sons would marry women, and to bring them in the home, they would build an extension on the home. And so you can go, if you to Israel, you see the footprints of the home just keep getting wider and wider as they add more rooms as the family grows. So you see that family was important. Now, yes, they went to the tabernacle or synagogue or the temple or whatever. So social organization, how do they get together? How do they express their faith in community? And part of this is also then how do they see the methods they see to grow their society of their faith. And Christianity, we would think evangelism is what we call that. There are religions that evangelism doesn't even make sense because there's no core message or savior they're trying to tell people about. They're just wanting people to adopt a worldview that affects how they relate to each other. So faith in general, these are the 6 things that pretty much we're going to talk about in some form or the other in regard to all of these world religions. Okay, so that's the last slide I have. Yay, team. My question for you is, are there any faiths or religions you definitely want to hit as we do this? Besides any of the ones that have been mentioned, because if I mention them, I'll probably do them. But if you want to mention it anyway, yes, ma'am.
Taoism.
Tao? Taoism?
What's the Hare Krishna? What is that?
Hare Krishna. I don't have the hair to be a Hare Krishna. Any others?
I got one.
Yes.
I don't know if it's called Rastafarianism or Rasta, but I'd be interested in your take on it.
I want to know Scientology.
Well, my stepson was into it for a while, so I know I'm a little familiar.
Was Scientology's in there or the one you mentioned?
No, no, Rasta.
Rasta, interesting.
But I went through therapy with some Scientologists. That's definitely interesting.
Any others?
We're gonna go ahead and do Muslim.
Definitely. Yeah, all of the,
All the main ones you're gonna cover.
where's the graph? Like Christians, Muslims, we don't really talk about this because how do you talk? None. That's it. They don't believe anything. Go home. Hindus, yes. Buddhists, for sure. Jewish faith we'll talk about. We had, maybe Jainism we might cover briefly because, yeah, but definitely want to talk about Baha'i. Baha'i is interesting to me. Sikhism, Shinto, Buddhism is there. So yeah, and Taoism was on there. Yes, sir.
The natives, I think, are pretty interesting, like the Native Americans.
Native American religion.
I was
It's
thinking
similar to,
something-
Yeah, I think that's interesting because we live here.
Yeah, I've talked to one at a rodeo. And it was interesting.
And I was thinking African tribal is a different, but I don't even know how you would research that because that's
That's so.
So it's
that's so ancient that I don't even know.
And it's going to be very varied.
Right, particularly the African tribal, right.
Yeah. really any folk type religion.
Right.
You know, so we may talk about like the Afro-Caribbean in a broad sense, which would pull some of that in, which is Santeria, voodoo, and that sort of thing. African tribe.
Native American would be interesting because like you said, that's certainly,
Yeah.
you know, what we.
So apparently this class is gonna be 100 weeks long. So I will say, obviously tonight, it's not a traditional Bible study, right? We didn't say, look at this and whatever, and there will be, as we go, my intent is a bit of an apologetic interaction, because some of these faiths you may encounter people in. And so might want to have some sort of understanding of, in conversation, things that would help you evaluate and also maybe respond. Yes, ma'am.
Where are you putting the Jehovah's Witness / Mormons and all of them? Is that gonna be under your Christian talk and you got lots of arms going off?
Yeah, basically, sects of Christianity,
Okay.
SECTX, not SEX. Different talk. That's different.
Cause that's obviously something that we here in America tend to run into.
A lot.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Early. But that's all Christian.
yeah.
It's under, yes, the broad umbrella of Christianity, you know, Christ, Christian, Jesus. So Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, they talk about Jesus.
Big,
They have, the Bible is one of their books, or a translation of the Bible, in addition sometimes to others. So yeah. We will hit those. Okay. Anything else to add to the list? I wrote down the ones you mentioned.
No, I like it that you're gonna do this, because I think religions should not divide, but they should bring people together. And people can have different thoughts, you know, and habits and
Well, yeah.
understanding is better than just.
I would hope that, I think, one of my hopes is that we would have a better understanding of people that we might encounter from different faiths. Some of these faiths you may never encounter. Some of them you may. When I say apologetic, I'm not giving you tools that you go, hey, you're a Jainist, let me tell you how you can know Jesus. But just to have an understanding of where they're coming from, so that in conversation, you might know how to share your faith in a way that is more meaningful, even if it's just in small ways, you know, not go through the 4 spiritual laws or anything, but have a chance to interact in a way that might have them question some of their own beliefs and think about the validity of our Christian faith. We'll see. You don't know? What? I'm sorry. Somebody say something. So that's the goal. I hope it will be at least interesting. Maybe enjoyable, but I don't want to push my luck.
We're gonna make it interesting, interesting group of people.
Yes, we do. That's very
So
true.
that's why it's gonna be.
We have a group that is interesting.
Yes.
All right. So I shall get that thing off the screen, but you know, no, that's better. And we will pray and call it a night. Father in heaven, we thank you for your love for us. We thank you that you have revealed yourself to us, especially fully and finally through Jesus. Lord, I thank you that in him we have hope and life and salvation. And I pray that as we undertake these next weeks of looking at some of the religions of the world, Lord, that you would help us to gain a better understanding, on the one hand, of the beauty and the goodness of our God and our faith, in contrast to some of the faith that we will interact with. But also, Lord, help us to understand ways that we might better interact when we have the opportunity to meet people of other faiths in a way that could influence them toward your goodness and your grace and your salvation. Lord, thank you for your Spirit who is with us, who fills us, who guides us. May we walk in step with you in all things at all times, as we seek to honor you and glorify your name. For you are worthy, we pray in Jesus' name.